Badiucao, thank you for being here with us. Thank you for being in this interview.
Sure, it's a pleasure to talk with your program.
Thank you. Okay, so first question. Well, let's start from the beginning, right? Could you summarize your story up until now?
So I am an artist, born in Shanghai and then exiled in Australia at the moment. So my art is basically focusing on the human rights issues and problems in China mainly, but also talking about human rights issue in the world globally as well. I have been using my art to challenge the Chinese government for 7-8 years, and I've been paying my personal price to it. I've been persecuted by the government. I've been harassed. Even I am, thousands miles away from China. I think China is still the country decades ago, like the Chairman Mao's time. It is never, modernized or having any trace of political reform to be a democratic society. So I feel it's very necessary and important to using any chance, including art, to expose what China is really about to the world.
And how would you present the Chinese government to someone who has no idea what goes on in your country?
Well, basically, the Chinese government is using the old tactic of cracking down everything with its more sophisticated censorship that's been powered by internet, AI technology, and everything. China is very good at building this illusion that Chinese government has been changed from its historic image. It tried to persuade the world that, well, China is a modernized country who is following the rule of the world. But the truth is that it's just an illusion. True, China wants to make business with other countries, but it's only a way to sustain its power.
How does the official censorship structure in China works?
Well, the censorship comes with different levels. As early as kids entering schools, the censorship is already happening. It happens on all the textbooks. It happens on the way the teachers delivering the knowledge to the kids. It's also a form of this education which is not encouraging people to have independent and critical thinking against any authoritarian. Well, when people grow up, you will see the censorship is on internet, it's on publishing, it's on news. It comes with different levels. I believe most of people know for the internet, the China system of censorship is called Great Firewall. And that system blocks almost every major website, which is popular to any other people around the world, like Google, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, you name it, or important platform which providing people a way to see how the world is really working, to see story from different individual angles is blocked in China. And the censorship does not just stop at blocking things. It also creating a lot of propaganda, try to kind of brainwash its citizen, and also creating illusion that deceiving the people outside of China as well. So now they're calling a global propaganda program. And in a lot of countries that you will see suddenly news from China are flooded. They want to create a new narrative, which is against the traditional, let's say, Western view from the media. They want to provide this alternative story, which is pretty much reshaping the very idea of what democracy and freedom is. Because inside of China, they will tell you, yes, we have freedom and democracy as well. And it's a Chinese character style, value, which is different from the Western ones. But we all know it's actually nothing same as the freedom or the democracy that we are, understand. But this is how China do it. They coloring everything. They pollute everything. They redefine words that creating this lie to everyone.
many people, including human rights defenders, close their eyes for what goes on in China. Why is that?
Well, I think China played a very good game of accusing people of being racist. And here's the thing, the Chinese government always trying to blur the boundary between people, nation, and government. In their narratives, they would say the Communist Party represents as people is the leader of the country. So anyone who dare to criticize the Chinese government means you are racist against China in general, means you discriminate Chinese people in general. And apparently, especially I guess for the liberal wings or the left wings, politicians or activists around the world, people are afraid to be called as racist because this is what they're fighting for. And make no mistake, I hate racism against ordinary Chinese people. And I'm definitely not, a kind of activist laid on the conservative or far right wing. I am against racism as much as those activists, but I see clearly the difference between people and Chinese government. Well, I don't see criticism on the Chinese government has anything to do as discrimination against Chinese people. And in fact, because there's no democracy, like we never elect this government. This government is a pure oppressor that's slavering my people. So criticize the Chinese government is actually helping the Chinese people to get the freedom as we all deserve. But unfortunately, not many activists around the world are seeing it properly. And there's also this kind of mentality, like as if it's still in the environment of a Cold War situation and you have to pick a side. You either criticize the US government or you criticize the Chinese government. But for me, for many things, they are equally problematic. US government definitely is not perfect. It did so much crimes against minorities in other countries in the history, and some of the crimes continues now. But it does not mean you have to pro-China in order to criticize US government. And apparently a lot of people didn't see it that way.
Well, yeah, you talked about racism, and we've seen a lot of racism accusations since the pandemic started, right? Everyone that says that the virus started in China or calls it a Chinese virus, they're accused of being racist. And how can someone in the West that wants to criticize the Chinese government escape the trap from being called racist?
I think the name of the virus, which is, simply objectively talking about the place where it originated, is no problem. But the issue is not just the name itself, but who kind of initiated the name, who is promoting the name. I don't think people like Trump, who is clearly associated with all those far-right swings in America, would be a good people who initiated the name. So it is understandable that people seeing Trump's naming Chinese virus as a kind of racism, and I actually agree with it. But I mean, why don't just name it as maybe CCP virus or Xi virus, Xi Jinping, the Chinese president? But just, make it clear it's against this dictatorship instead of against the nation or the people. And actually, like I said, the Chinese government really like the overseas Chinese population or Chinese in general being subject to racism. So after that, they can use the same narrative to saying, everything or every problem that happened to China is caused by the evil foreign force. And it's also, make it very easy to unite the people outside of China, because now Chinese are actually under attack of hate crime due to, some racism happened. And definitely a way to helping the Chinese people to fight its government is not saying, oh, you're the same as your government, you're a crime as well. That is definitely not the way. I would say the way is we need to fight racism alongside with fighting the Chinese government in the same time. and be including, be understanding the situation of the Chinese people inside of there, because of censorship, because of operation, that my people do not really have a voice inside of China, but they are not responsible for its government's crime. They are just as victims as a lot of people now around the world who are suffering from this pandemic.
How do you evaluate the way the Chinese government dealt with COVID-19?
It's horrifying. I would say the whole reason for the outbreak, the pandemic, is because of the awful handling of the virus outbreak from the Chinese government. I mean, the virus has been discovered maybe in the middle or late December. The Chinese government did nothing on controlling the virus for at least a month, apart from arresting 8 whistleblower doctors who tried to, warn the public about this existence of new virus. The Chinese government arrested them, punished them. And on the other hand, they didn't control the virus at all. They didn't warn the public. They didn't ask people to stop, moving around in order to control it. And it is because a very precious, about a month's time being wasted in the very early stage, which, there are still opportunity to have everything under control. Then the whole world is suffering from it. And that's just the beginning. And after that, well, the Chinese government starting to using a lot of inhumane way via its locking down. We see initially the city Wuhan, where the virus has been discovered first, is under locking down in a very short notice. So basically, people do not have any preparing of food or shelter, will have to face this consequence. So suddenly over the night, they're not allowed to leave the city. And other people are not allowed to go into the city either. That creates huge panic within the population. And I believe, well, locking down actually is necessary to fighting this virus. But it has to be based on 2 things. One is totally transparency of the information. So the residents who are under the locking down need to be informed 100% of what is happening and what they can do. There need to be, clear instruction. But in China, they're not doing it. The Chinese government didn't really giving proper instruction for the residents. Everyone is confusing and scared for the very first couple of days of the locking down. Secondly is you need to have sufficient supply to the city who is under this quarantine. But from my understanding, since the very beginning, even the hospital do not have enough medical support. They don't have PPE, they don't have face masks, they even don't have enough basic medicine to treat those patients. But none of this issue has been, mentioned or discussed or solved, and the cracking down just kicking in. So the result is the whole city is in panic. The hospital is out of capacity, and people are just worrying their family and everything. But anyway, what we're talking is China. They don't really care about people's life, or not just physical health, mental health. They don't care either. So that's why we see so many cases. A lot of people actually died because of poor preparation of the locking down. We see people die because there's no food in home. There's one extreme case, a boy who had mental disability starved to death at home because his parents is forced to be quarantined. So meaning people got left, died at home, meaning this, especially for meaning disadvantaged group, like people who are with their senior age, not mention homeless people, and also because the hospital is running out of capacity and the only patients that treating are the ones who are infected by the virus, which means if you have other diseases like cancer or heart attack, then hospital won't treat you. A lot of people actually died because of this as well. And I don't think the Chinese government ever share of those truths to the world. What it trying to do is, trying to establish this impression. The Chinese government has done a great job on controlling everything, and people just live happily and trust the government. But none of that is true.
So you don't believe the outbreak is under control in China right now?
Well, this is another mythology. I always put a huge question mark on any numbers being published by the Chinese government. For example, in the initial stage, when we see the gross number of infected patients, it is very problematic. And the reason why I say it is because China is running out the test kit, the virus test kit in the hospital. So a lot of people actually died even before diagnosed. But the number you see is, somehow this is the number without really including the people who are actually died or might die because of the virus. So the number is very questionable. And this is the same government we're talking about. Now China is saying, look, our number has not been growed in any sense, and we need everyone to both go back to the office, go back to the factory. But the thing is, they changed the criteria, the standard of test the virus now. So now you are, even if you're tested positive of infection, they don't count you into the infected number as long as you don't have severe symptoms. So in other words, if you're not dying, they don't see you as a patient of coronavirus. And this is how we get the zero number now. And I think it's not very hard to understand why Chinese government is trying to do so. Because, the whole legitimacy of the Chinese government is building on this illusion of miracle economic growth. And that's how they stabilize the society. And the worst result of the outbreak of the virus is actually stop people go to the factories or to go to the office, which means the economy is facing collapsing. And the Chinese government cannot afford that. It cannot afford the potential instability of the society due to the recession of the economy. So now the Chinese government is gambling the life of the people, saying, look, go back to the factories. Everything is under control. But I would really doubt it. I'm afraid that there might be a high possibility a second wave of infection could happen in the coming days or weeks. And it's very problematic. The other wrongdoing of this is actually giving fake hope of the world. It makes people to believe, it's all controllable and we can do it as well. So a lot of people or government or organization might underestimate the potential threat of this virus. It's also like, the whole thing is started by the Chinese government because it's incompetency of controlling it. But now somehow they want to picture the Chinese government as the leader fighting the virus. I mean, this is ridiculous. But when they repeat the lie 1,000 times, a lot of people might buy it. And that's another very horrible thing that we're facing. I have to say that we have to also think the aftermath of this outbreak, because this is not just about the virus, and it's also about what kind of life that we will be living in after this outbreak. If the Chinese government's narrative become alternative choice for many countries choose of its future, then it will be very problematic. We all know this is a very special moment, and a lot of special measurement will be used in order to battle this virus, which means a lot of citizens will have to sacrifice privacy and other rights in order to collaborate with the government. And that's exactly what Chinese government is trying to do, to control the virus. But the problem is after the pandemic, after the outbreak, is it going to be normalized this way that citizens will have to sacrifice privacy to authority in order to exchange safety? And if the world's starting to follow in the Chinese way or the Chinese government's way, then this could very likely be a big issue for our future, for the entire mankind.
The death of Dr. Li Wenliang brought on manifestations of hate from a part of the Chinese population towards the CCP. In your point of view, has the memory of Dr. Li become a problem to the government?
Definitely, because his name is also one of the things the Chinese government try to censor. His legacy become a battleground. The Chinese government trying to say, "Oh, he's a party member." He's actually sacrificed for the country, but normal citizens all know what caused his death, and he has been punished because he tried to warn people about this virus a month before the government did anything. Actually, I witnessed something is quite unusual recently on internet of China, that there hasn't been this kind of rebel campaign for a very long time. But after his death, everyone on every platform is actually demanding more freedom of speech in China, because we all know what happened and why he died. I think China somehow need this figure. I don't think Li Wenliang is kind of hero like Julia Assange or Edward Snowden or Chelsea Manning. He's not like, I'm gonna battle the government and tell the truth to the world. And in fact, he is just a normal guy who want to warn the people who close to him about this new virus. But even doing that is touching the red line of the regime, and he was punished. And he actually died because of the infection of the virus eventually. So that is something everybody can relate it to. That is somehow even more powerful than a superhero kind of figure, because Li Wenliang can be everyone. Li Wenliang can be your neighbor, can be your brother, can be your classmate. But he died, and that makes everyone angry about it, about how government is treating this. So it tells me two things. Like, one is people do have the reasoning capacity to see in the problem of society. The brainwash is not 100% working in China. And possibly, the Chinese people are so quiet against this government. It's because the operation is too severe. The risk is too high to pay if you dare to make your voice out. But it does not mean everybody is, idiots who cannot see the problem of the government. Well, I guess the Chinese society or the Chinese people are just waiting for a chance. And that will be very important for us to have a new country. And I do hope that they will come soon.
The Chinese government has been offering help to a lot of countries. How do you evaluate this movement?
Well, again, the Chinese government's always good at kind of turning the narrative or escaping from its responsibility. It is, of course, a good thing to be kind to other people and helping each other, especially for this, critical moment for all human beings around. But the problem is, what is the motivation behind? And what is the reason why China is doing that? And actually, well, I also heard a lot of news. The products China is donated is actually problematic. Recently, Czech Republic brought a big amount of a virus test kit, and it turns out to be only 20% of them is working. So, well, this is a typical way of Chinese government helping. And sometimes, they exploit the situation and trying to make them look like a hero or savior to other countries. But the truth is, you can't even make sure whatever they donated from China is with good quality. So a lot of them might just be PR stunt to elevate the reputation of the Chinese government. But I don't think they really want to help. It's all for their own interest and benefit in the future.
How do you evaluate the way the Chinese government acts on Western social media like Twitter or Facebook?
Well, recently I just experiencing something very interesting. Actually, a media company probably associated with the propaganda department of China is trying to bribe a lot of Chinese Twitter users for us to kind of posting positive image of China for them. And actually, one of them get in contact with me. They're offering me about $240 to posting propaganda videos for them twice a month. And apparently, they didn't do a very good research on me and knowing my political stance. Well, which I assume it's because of censorship. So the people who are doing this job don't really know the diaspora of Twitter community. But however, this is happening. I mean, the Chinese government is trying to buying the influence on social media, like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. They also building their own social media. TikTok is a Chinese company, and there has been a lot of cases showing TikTok is monitoring its users. It's actually censorship its users' content. One of Muslim girl trying to talking about the Xinjiang's concentration camps against Uyghurs on TikTok platform, and her video got taken down. And she had to ask help from the media to get her voice back. And this is exactly how China is doing it. And nowadays, Chinese government has become more and more aggressive. That you will see on Twitter, suddenly a lot of Chinese foreign department officials are registering Twitter accounts. The recent saga of calling this conspiracy that American is the one who's behind the virus making is actually started by one of the spokesmen of the foreign department of China. So it's all showing that China has been, well, they think they're strong and they're confident and they want to conquering any of the platform, just as what they did inside of China. And again, they are using a lot of nasty ways to buying this influence. It's not about persuading people with reasoning, logic, and evidence, but it's about creating illusion of influence. And that can be achieved by online trolls, AI-powered robots, or bribing normal user. And that's everything they do now.
What are Xi Jinping's intentions?
He is definitely a leader who is a lot of character. Well, you will see he's trying to build a personal cult around him. He changed the constitution of China to allow him to be the king forever, which basically canceling the limitation of his term. A lot of people saying he might be the second Chairman Mao. He is already the most powerful leader since the Mao's time, decades ago. I think it's also a logic of this regime from the very beginning. And this party is corrupted to the root and run by several families, which means there's small possibility it will reform itself. Sometimes people romanticizing strongman think, it will provide safety, and maybe sometimes they will want to make the world a better place by reforming the regime eventually. But I don't see that case will happen in China. And Xi Jinping himself is desperately a power grasper. All he cares is his position inside of China, inside the party. And a lot of things they're doing, like a lot of policy has been created, is not helping China become a modernized country, but push it back to the very beginning of this regime. More area has been under tightened control, especially the online free speech aspects. There are human rights lawyers being cracking down under his term. There are artists being persecuted under his term. You see what happened in Hong Kong, that the protest has happened for so long, but the government refused to address the willing of the people. You see what happened to the Muslim community, the Uyghur community in Xinjiang, the concentration camps, just like what happened in Nazi period time during the Second Great War is happening in China again. You see how Tibetan people has suffering from its policy. And under his term, basically, there's no real improvement in any of the social or democratic level in China. So I think he's a very dangerous player.
Well, thank you so much for this interview. It's been a real pleasure. And
Sure.
It was great to hear what you think about all of this. And well, that's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thanks for giving me the platform and the voice to introduce to your people about my understanding of China. I mean, it will be unfair to say that everything that I said is completely aligned with the truth. Of course, I have my own bias, but I'm trying to be as objective as I can be, and that's actually what I has been, experienced in personal life as well. So.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think you're doing a great job. So thank you. Thank you very much.